My boss didn't train me, but blames me for mistakes, so I used the fire alarm to get back at him. Here's what happened. Subscribe to AmITheA on YouTube and hit the bell for notifications. I worked for a safety agency for over a decade. It was a small organization, nothing fancy, and we rarely saw danger, save for the occasional old couple that would park in our empty lot and mess around. If you've ever had to see a wrinkly pair of bodies entwined on a high-resolution camera, you'd understand the danger I had to face. But I digress. At any rate, when I started with the organization, it was well organized. All files were meticulously kept, the golf carts and cameras were in pristine condition, and everyone was well trained in safety. It was an excellent 5 years, until the Mercy Healthcare Act hit, and all of us temp employees, yes, I was a temp for a decade, were told that we were only allowed to work 24 hours a week so the company could avoid paying for health insurance. I stayed as I had finally decided to finish school. It was still a decent job and decent pay, and was perfect for allowing me time to get my homework done. 2 years later, I get my associate's degree and started my bachelor's. And that's when the new boss was hired for my shift. We'll call him Billy Bob. Billy Bob was a narcissistic, misogynistic egomaniac. Generally, he hid in his office the entire shift, so I rarely had to interact with him. Until one day, I was going through the paperwork and I found our new hires had never undergone a training that was required by both company policy and an accreditation system that we partnered with. I had an oh no moment and then began making phone calls to set up the training, apologizing for the oversight. That was not mine, as Billy Bob should have done it. I organized the training with the employees. When Billy Bob came back from his lunch break, my heart rate was finally returning to normal. I informed him, without blaming him mind you, that our new employees needed to go through a training. I took him through what I had done. He nodded at me, patted my head, jerk, and walked away. I thought that was it. Nope. 2 days later, I'm sitting in HR, being handed an improvement plan for insubordination. What? Apparently, I had undermined poor Billy Bob and made him look stupid. He looked me dead in the eye and said that my only job was to sit at the front desk and enter the data from the security agents on patrol. Oh, and take phone calls and answer questions. I was livid. I took a deep breath, smiled sweetly at the HR lady who knew me well, and said I wouldn't make that mistake again. I immediately put in my 2 weeks' notice. Billy Bob smiled, if he only knew. The next 2 weeks were the easiest weeks of my life. I did exactly what Billy Bob told me to do. No other paperwork was filed. All the lost and found that was turned in was sitting in a pile behind me. None of the cameras were calibrated. The annual emergency test was never conducted. The fire alarms weren't tested. The broken down golf cart was never fixed. None of the fix-it tickets for maintenance were submitted, and all the while, Billy Bob was on vacation. Perfect. The day he was back to work was my last day. I decided to leave with an audible bang. You see, I was the last employee there who had been given the training on all the systems. Every time I attempted to teach a newcomer, we had a huge turnover because of Billy Bob, I would be told that Billy Bob would teach them later. He never did, because he never let me teach him. I had all the codes for the command center. I knew what key went to what locker. Basically, the moment I left, he was screwed. So I made it worse. I set the fire alarm test to go off the minute I was to clock out for the day. I was bouncing with anticipation as my fingers hovered over the clock out button. As soon as the alarm started going off, I hit the button, grabbed my stuff, and headed for the door. Billy Bob comes tearing out of his office, shouting at me to turn it off. I shouted back, "Sorry, I'm no longer officially your employee. Have fun!" and tossed all the keys on the counter. The look on that jerk's face was priceless as I pranced out the door. I could still hear the alarms in my car a half-mile away. Glorious. Alright, we got a classic situation of some new, arrogant jerk coming into management who thinks he knows better than employees that have been there for 10 10 years. Someone with this type of personality coming into a position of power, they feel the need to flex their muscles when they first get there. Maybe make an example of someone who's been there a long time. And it very rarely works out the way they want it to. Just because that person's in a technically lower position than you doesn't mean they're less valuable to the company. That person who's been there for 10 years and knows how to do everything does way more for them than you do, despite what the paychecks might reflect. But that's another conversation. This jerk needed a wake-up call, and I can't argue with our original poster's timing. Some say you can still hear the alarms to this day. Customer Karen tries to tell me I'm not allowed into an area where I work. So I work in a retail/drugstore establishment. Heavy stream of people from opening to closing. And I've been with this one specific store for over 4 years now. Always got mistaken for employees in other stores, but the situation never got bad. Never have I ever had a customer do anything except ask the big question and then apologize. But this was new. I had just walked into my own store. Normally I carry a bag with my uniform in it so I can throw it over my current shirt just in case I have to stop somewhere before or after work or anything. Just for this story's exact reason. It's a straight walk from the front door to the break room. And as I put my hand on the door, this lady starts snapping her fingers and doing the "nuh-uh" sound you normally try to use on a pet or child if they're misbehaving. Of course, this grabs my attention. And of course, she's looking right at me. "No, you're not allowed back there." "Pardon?" "That's for employees only." "Are you stupid? You children aren't allowed back there." "Where's your parents? They need to discipline you for going into restricted areas." I'm in my 20s, with obvious tattoos at that, and I realize what she means. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm one of the employees. My uniform's in my bag. I can show you my badge too if that isn't sufficient. But my shift is about to start and I need to get ready." I pushed open the door and stepped in before she tried speaking again. I had to start my shift, but I was expecting her to storm in. She never did, and when I came out in the uniform, I didn't even see her in the store anymore. The store manager came up while I was at the register after a few minutes of the shift starting and said someone tried to tell her a child was in our break room attempting to steal the employee's items. And she had to tell the customer that I was in fact an employee after hearing the lady describe what I looked like. Wish I could have seen how that conversation went down. I love when random people try and tell you that you don't work where you work. Like, who are you? You're a customer in this store. How do you know I don't work here? Anyone who wears an actual uniform to work and not a suit or something for the office normally doesn't go in wearing their uniform. I mean, some do, but I know when I worked at a computer hardware store, I didn't want to be wearing my uniform on the bus. The first time some random stranger comes up to you on the bus and starts asking you how to troubleshoot something, you learn that lesson. In the case of this employee, they probably don't want to be walking through the store in their uniform before they've started work and have you, Karen, coming up to them and asking them for help, or most likely insisting. You're a customer in the store. What they're doing is none of your business. That's up to the store to monitor who's going into that room. Just do what you came here to do and do everyone else a favor and leave them alone. While working as an intern, I got mistaken for a client and treated like a child. My last semester of college, I did an internship as a part of my special education degree. The organization I was working for was what's called a sheltered workshop. Essentially, it's a place for companies to send product to be processed by people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Autism, Down syndrome, things like that, but at a reduced wage. I actually spent the entire semester researching sheltered workshops and the practice of sub-minimum wage. So it felt like undercover journalism most of the time. The employees, or clients, are monitored and supported by a larger staff of barely trained non-disabled employees. I have chronic pain and fatigue, which means that I need to use mobility aids to get around. I alternated between a rolling walker and a manual wheelchair for most of my time there. I was the only non-client with a disability. I also wore a lanyard with my badge on it, which had my name and intern, university name, in big letters. Now, sometimes my lanyard would get turned around, so the front couldn't be seen. On many occasions, I'd be doing work on my computer or a notebook while sitting in the common area, and one of the non-disabled employees would strike up a conversation, either with me or with a group including me. Without fail, they would always address me with the same tone and manner they addressed the clients, while speaking perfectly normally to everyone else around. My personal favorite way of handling that was when they pulled the sugar-sweet, "And who are you?" "Oh, hi! I'm Original Poster. I'm intern from university. So nice to meet you. I'm really learning a lot from this experience." The look on their face as it dawns on them that I'm actually an articulate, college-educated person still makes me laugh to this day. It's like you could see the gears turn and the foot get shoved in their mouth. Lesson to be learned: don't treat disabled people like children, and never assume someone using a wheelchair is by default also intellectually disabled. I agree with our Original Poster. You should never make assumptions about disabled people. You don't know what their issue is and what they're capable of actually doing. I will say though, given the environment, I understand why this mistake was made. That's no excuse. And I understand why our Original Poster's frustrated. But still, I feel like it's more understandable than just out on the street somewhere. Lady calls IT because her keyboard is possessed. So a call comes in. A user reports her keyboard is going erratic. It's possessed. I take a stroll down to the office bearing a new replacement keyboard. I get there and I begin to make sure that it is indeed a faulty keyboard, and not just some gunk sticking the key down. I open up Notepad and am immediately barraged by everything seems fine otherwise. This keyboard's the same model as the replacement I brought over, so relatively new. No sticky keys either. Very well, a faulty keyboard it is. Until I move the tower and notice a second wireless keyboard sitting on the side of it, laying flat on the floor with a stack of papers and a tissue box sitting on top. I pull it out and notice the N barrage has stopped on the screen. I press the N key once again and an N is added to the word file. Exorcism was performed. Demons were banished, and I am now a priest. Okay, this one's just kind of funny, honestly. Who knows how long that keyboard's been there? She probably forgot about it. Maybe it was the person who worked there before her, for all we know. Things like that end up under the desk in the back can stay there for quite some time. That being said, I would have thought she would have at least tried unplugging it and plugging it back in. That's kind of step number 2. After, have you tried turning it off and on again? I told my stepdaughter the reason boys aren't asking her out is because she's fat. I, 44-year-old male, have been with Penelope, 39-year-old female, for the last 9 years. We each had a daughter prior to getting together. My daughter, Amanda, is 17, and hers, Daniela, is also 17. When my wife and I first moved in together, we decided that each of us would only discipline our respective daughters. For the past 5 years, Daniela has been eating a crazy amount of food. She's put on a lot of weight. She's more than 200 pounds now, and she's borderline obese, if not already. I had concerns that she had an eating disorder and suggested to my wife that she put her in therapy, because this isn't healthy. However, my wife dismissed my concerns and told me she's a growing girl who needs to eat. The problem is she was also taking food that didn't belong to her. For example, I once bought a box of protein bars for myself only to find out later they were all gone before I had a chance to eat even one bar. Amanda's best friend gave her a piece of cake to bring home for her birthday, and that also disappeared. We later found out that Daniela had eaten them. The girls had so many fights because Daniela was taking food without asking. It got so bad that I had to get Amanda a mini fridge so that she could keep food for herself in her room. For the past couple of years, Amanda has been getting interest from boys. Daniela hasn't been getting as much. And it's not because she's ugly. She has a pretty face. But combined with how unhealthy she is, it's not a surprise she doesn't get asked out often. Daniela doesn't take it too kindly. She's made a lot of passive-aggressive remarks about the boys in her class, like how they have crap taste in women, and all men are losers. She's made many comments like that. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to encroach on my wife's boundary, but I should have. Anyway, Amanda has had a crush on a boy for a while now, and he recently asked her out. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when she excitedly told me about it and where they were planning to go. I was obviously delighted for her. Daniela was in the living room watching TV. She overheard us and passed a comment. "Boys will go after any chick who opens their legs." I told her that's not a nice thing to say, and asked her to apologize. She replied, "I'm not apologizing to this slew." I saw Amanda had tears running down her face. I just got so angry. I yelled at Daniela and said it's none of her business who Amanda dates. And the only reason she isn't getting any dates is cause she's fat. Daniela burst into tears and went to complain to her mom. That started a big argument, and I told her she needs to parent her daughter and tell her to keep her nasty remarks to herself. They ended up going to my mother-in-law's house to spend the night. When I talked to my sister, she said I should have handled the situation more delicately, since Daniela is still a child and clearly having self-esteem issues. However, I only said what I did to defend my daughter. So, am I the jerk? This might be one where we have a couple of jerks. Let's start with Daniela, who very clearly is having self-esteem issues like our original poster's sister said. That's a hard time for any kid, especially for someone who's having a tough time with their weight. There's a whole lot we could get into here about trying to understand the psychology of what's going on. I'm not a psychologist, so my opinion here doesn't really mean anything. But does she have self-esteem issues because of her eating, or is she eating because of her self-esteem issues? What came first here, the chicken or the egg? I'd be willing to bet it's the self-esteem issues. I do agree with our original poster that I think she needs to talk to someone and really get down to the root of this. And hey, if you want to lose weight, let's be honest, there's no better motivator than trying to attract a mate. All jokes aside though, that was a really nasty thing to say. I can understand you've got your own self-esteem issues, but when you lash out at someone like that and say something like that to someone else cares about, they're gonna have something to say in response. Which brings us to the original poster. I totally understand the knee-jerk reaction. It was instinctive. In that moment, you weren't thinking and you wanted to hurt her feelings. All I can say is, at least this one was in defense and not attacking her. There could have been a better way to handle this, like our poster's sister said. But sometimes when you're in that moment, you're not thinking straight, and you say what you want to say. I told my sister if she wasn't going to wear a bridesmaid's dress, she shouldn't bother coming to my wedding. I'm planning a lovely bridesmaid entourage for my wedding consisting of my beautiful sister and cousins. We're all on very good terms. Today, I told my sister I thought of navy blue dresses for the bridesmaids. I sent her a couple of pics very enthusiastically. I thought it's elegant, matches with the suits, and gives a nice pop to the white wedding dress on pics. The response from my sister was instant. "You can't be serious. I won't wear that. Everyone will hate that." Or is it that you want all of us to look like crap? I heard there are weddings where the bride wants to make the bridesmaids intentionally look bad. That's probably your plan. She said her color type is autumn, and navy looks the worst on that complexion. My cousins, she said, are also autumn, and I'll make them look bad too. After my heart sank, I started looking for alternate colors on this season's color wheel thing. I sent her a couple of alternative suggestions, different deep blues. She replied that she doesn't want to be my bridesmaid, but wants to be pretty. She would attend all the getting ready with the girls, but won't wear the matching dress. I read this happens in bridal parties. There's usually one difficult person. The suggestion is to ask them to step down as bridesmaid. For me, it obviously didn't come to that as my sister stepped down without discussion. Her point of view is that I should care about people feeling good at my wedding, and I don't have much empathy. I cried for a bit and then told my sister that honestly, after this, I'll have a sad and angry feeling every time I look at her at the wedding, in her pretty dress, being satisfied with herself at my expense, and that maybe it's best if she's just not there then. Am I the jerk? The sad thing is, it sounds like the damage has been done. Like you said, if she comes to the wedding, you're going to be thinking about this whole interaction every time you look at her, and it's going to put you in a bad mood for your wedding night. But at the same time, if she's not there, the second you start to see your family and stuff around, you're going to notice she's missing and still be thinking about it anyway. It's kind of unfortunate that this whole thing had to happen in general. At the end of the day, I think navy is pretty generic. I don't think it's something that really looks bad on anyone, right? I mean, it's pretty close to black, which is neutral, right? I don't know. I'm just a guy talking. Seriously though, if this is how she's gonna be, I say you just let it slide off. Let her wear her pretty dress if she doesn't want to be a bridesmaid. As long as she's not gonna be causing any other issues at the wedding, we can let this one go. What's happened has happened, and there's nothing that can be done about it now. The only thing that this is gonna serve to do is worsen your relationship with your sister, which I don't think is something that you want long term. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything's linked in the description.